Hello and welcome to the nominations for the 2020 Gold Derby Film Awards. I'm Daniel Montgomery. I'm being joined today by Chris Beecham, Paul Sheehan, Marcus James Dixon, Joyce Eng, Susan Wazina, and Zach Laws to announce the nominees in 22 categories as decided by Gold Derby's users. 2,700 people voted for these nominations. And they're incredibly savvy, so you should be very proud of these nominations if you hear your names announced and your films announced. I'm going to get us started with the first three categories of these awards, starting with Best Foreign Language Film. The nominees are Atlantics, Les Miserables, Pain and Glory, Parasite, and Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Moving on to Best Documentary Feature. The nominees are American Factory, Apollo 11, so we did not snub it like the Oscars did, For Sama, Honeyland, and One Child Nation. And for Best Animated Feature, the nominees are Frozen 2, another avenged Oscar snub, How to Train Your Dragon, The Hidden World, I Lost My Body, Klaus, and Toy Story 4. And for the foreign language film category, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which we nominated, wasn't eligible at the Oscars because France, the country that film is from, chose to submit Les Miserables instead. So we nominated both of them. I have a feeling Portrait of a Lady would have gotten in at the Oscars regardless. But yeah, for foreign film, Invisible Life just missed. Honeyland, which got into a documentary, just missed. Beanpole was also at the top 10 there. And we had the Oscar nominee Edge of Democracy just missed for documentary. And actually Missing Link, which got the Oscar nomination, was less than 100 points out of a nomination, just missed. So those were some of the close calls.
Okay, next is Best Visual Effects. Ad Astra, Avengers Endgame, The Irishman, 1917, and Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. And next is Best Sound. They are Ad Astra, Avengers Endgame, Ford versus Ferrari, Joker, in 1917.
Yeah, so we had near misses for Rocketman and The Lighthouse, actually, for Best Sound, which I was very excited. I voted for The Lighthouse for Best Sound, but it's not an obvious sort of big action movie kind of choice. So I was happy it got as close as it did. And Lion King and Alita Battle Angel were next in line for visual effects.
All right, so moving on to Best Original Score. The nominations are Glasgow, No Place Like Home for Wild Rose, A Glass of Soju for Parasite, I'm Gonna Love Me Again, Rocketman, Into the Unknown, Frozen 2, and Stand Up for Harriet. And then moving on to Best Score, we have Joker, Little Women, Marriage Story, 1917, and Us.
Yeah, poor Beyonce can't catch a break. She just missed out on Best Song in 6th place. Actually, Taylor Swift just missed out as well in 7th place for Beautiful Ghosts. And Best Score was really interesting. We had Avengers Endgame missed somewhat narrowly. Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, the great John Williams, was not totally out of it. He did get a lot of votes there too.
He has enough Oscar nominations.
Yeah, he's fine.
He doesn't need our help. Up next, we have the category of Best Production Design. The nominees are Knives Out, Little Women, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite. Then in Best Makeup and Hair, the nominees are Bombshell, Joker, Judy, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Rocketman.
Yeah, and we had for production design a couple closest calls. Jojo Rabbit and Joker were 6th and 7th. Irishman, also an Oscar nominee, in 8th. And Best Makeup, where I believe we've always nominated 5 films as opposed to the Oscars, which used to have just 3. So we had like Little Women, Dolomite came close. So yeah, that was. But this top 5 was pretty mostly solid.
Now we move on to Best Film Editing, and the nominees are Ford versus Ferrari, The Irishman, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite. And in Best Costume Design, the nominees are Dolomite Is My Name, Jojo Rabbit, Little Women, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Rocketman.
For those costumes, Downton Abbey just missed. Portrait of a Lady on Fire was in 7th place. And Joker, actually, which I think was the biggest surprise at the Oscars in this category, actually came in our top 10. It was in 8th place here.
Next, we have Best Cinematography, and the nominees are Joker, The Lighthouse, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite. And then we have a non-Oscar category, Best Breakthrough Performer. There's no film attached to these people because they just had a great year last year. And the nominees are Cho Yo-jong, Roman Griffin Davis, Ana de Armas, Florence Pugh, and Zhao Zhizhen.
I always love the breakthrough category because it's one that the Oscars don't have. There's no sort of analog, so we get to sort of go our own way. And this is such a great list, and so many great people just missed out. Like Beanie Feldstein was in 6th. Jessie Buckley, who had Judy and Wild Rose, was in 7th. Julia Butters from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was in 8th. So that was a really, really great list. Again, another near miss for Portrait of a Lady on Fire in Best Cinematography. It finished 6th. And we had Ad Astra in 7th.
Up next is Best Ensemble, another category not at the Oscars. The nominees are The Irishman, Knives Out, Little Women, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite.
And in that category, we had Marriage Story just missing. Avengers Endgame finished 7th. Jojo Rabbit, the SAG nominee, in 8th. Bombshell, another SAG nominee, in 9th. And rounding out our top 10 was actually The Farewell. Which brings us to the 2 writing categories, Best Original Screenplay and Best Adapted Screenplay. Starting with the original screenplays, the nominees are, speaking of which, The Farewell, Knives Out, Marriage Story, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite. And for Best Adapted Screenplay, the nominees are The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Little Women, and The Two Popes. And that adapted screenplay lineup, I believe, is 5 for 5 with the Oscars, and it just felt like there's such a consensus gathered around those 5 films that was a pretty secure list. Although Hustlers finished 6th, and A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood finished 7th. Actually, Avengers Endgame finished 8th for adapted screenplay with us. And for original screenplay, WGA nominee Booksmart just missed in 6th place. WGA and Oscar nominee 1917 was in 7th, and we actually had Uncut Gems in 8th.
Okay, next is Best Supporting Actor. Willem Dafoe, The Lighthouse. Al Pacino, The Irishman. Joe Pesci, The Irishman. Brad Pitt, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And Song Kang-ho, Parasite.
And what's especially interesting about this category is how not at all close it was, in the sense that these top 5 were so far ahead of literally anyone else. Tom Hanks actually came the closest in 6th place. I was a little surprised he didn't make it in, but he was in 6th place out of this category by about 500 points. And then it was another 300-point drop to get to 7th place, which was Anthony Hopkins in The Two Popes. And actually, Timothée Chalamet finished 8th. for Little Women, which I also think that's a very underrated performance in that film.
Well, moving on to Best Supporting Actress, actually only 2 of these match with the Oscars, which is just crazy. The nominations are Cho Yo-jong for Parasite, Laura Dern, Marriage Story, Jennifer Lopez for Hustlers, Florence Pugh, Little Women, and Zhao Zhuzhen for The Farewell.
And this was actually a much closer race between 5th and 6th. I won't say who was in 5th place, lest that influence the voting going forward, but Margot Robbie just missed out for Bombshell. She was about like 25 points out. Scarlett Johansson, another Oscar nominee, was just a little, like also less than 50 points out of a nomination. And then after that, it's actually Margot Robbie again for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And then Kathy Bates actually didn't come in until 14th place. She was the last Oscar.
Oh, Kathy.
like John Williams, she's doing fine.
Next up, we have the highly competitive Best Actor category. The nominees there are Antonio Banderas for Pain and Glory, Leonardo DiCaprio for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Adam Driver for Marriage Story, Joaquin Phoenix for Joker, and Adam Sandler for Uncut Gems. So while Kathy Bates might not have made it in, her son at least did.
And this was another pretty secure top 5. 6th place, just missing out. And I say just missing out. Was Taron Egerton, who had a lot of support, but was actually 200 points out of a nomination. And then Eddie Murphy for Dolomite, then Robert De Niro in The Irishman. And then in 9th place, actually Robert Pattinson for The Lighthouse, which I think is a really cool choice that didn't make it, but came closer than I would have expected. And that's like, I think our users have good taste.
Well, let's see, Daniel, if you agree with them on their Best Actress lineup. So it's Awkwafina for The Farewell, Scarlett Johansson, Marriage Story, Lupita Nyong'o, Us, Saoirse Ronan, Little Women, and Renee Zellweger for Judy.
I do like this lineup as well. And this is another one where we have a really interesting 6 through 10. We had Florence Pugh, actually, in Midsommar, almost went up against her Little Women sister. So she finished 6th, although she was a few hundred points out of a nomination too. Charlize Theron, who got an Oscar nomination, was in 7th, also had a lot of support. Then Ana de Armas, Golden Globe nominee for Knives Out. Adele Haenel from Portrait of a Lady on Fire was actually in 9th place. And then Elizabeth Moss for Her Smell in 10th place. The last Oscar nominee, Cynthia Erivo, finished 16th.
Next, we have Best Director, and the nominees are Bong Joon-ho, Parasite, Greta Gerwig, Little Women, Sam Mendes, 1917, Martin Scorsese, The Irishman, and Quentin Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So this is not congratulations to those men.
Yes, congratulations to those men and that one woman. And also, congratulations to those other women. We had 3 women in our top 10, in addition to Gerwig, who made the top 5. We had Celine Sciamma, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, was in 7th. And Lulu Wang actually got in 9th place for The Farewell. The closest call, though, to a nomination, and this was another really secure top 5, was Noah Baumbach in 6th place. He was like 500 points out of a nomination. Todd Phillips was also in our top 10, and so were the Safdie brothers for Uncut Gems.
And our final category for nominations, we have a guaranteed 10, unlike a floating scale at the Oscars. So Best Picture is these 10 nominees: The Farewell, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Knives Out, Little Women, Marriage Story, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite.
And that's a really cool top 10, I think. But I think 11 through 20 would have been just as interesting a set of nominations. Avengers Endgame just missed out in 11th place. Then we had The Lighthouse, then Uncut Gems, then Portrait of a Lady on Fire, then Booksmart, Pain and Glory, Midsommar in 17th, Us in 18th, Ford v. Ferrari, an Oscar nominee for Best Picture in 19th, and Hustlers in 20th. Honestly, I think that 10 would have been just as good a 10 almost as the 10 who got in. So this is a really, really cool lineup. Again, our users have impeccable taste. And just for a couple of statistics, leading the nominations are Parasite and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with 11 nominations each. Then Little Women has 9 nominations, and The Irishman and 1917 both have 8 apiece.
Well, before we wrap up, anybody that wants to have any comments, turn on your camera back on, and we've got a little bit extra time than we normally do. So anybody want to say anything?
Yeah, I was gonna say, did we nominate 8 acting contenders that the Oscars didn't? That's
12 out of 20 are the same.
What a year.
I thought it was a great year at the movies.
Mm-hmm.
As Daniel,
Yeah,
well, as Daniel mentioned earlier, over 2,700 people voted, about 2,750 roughly, which is way more than we've been getting the last. Well, I think ever, but I think we've been topping out around 2,000, 2,100, so that's a big jump.
Yeah, and if anyone thinks that like our users are just a bunch of SJWs who nominated people of color just to get revenge on the Oscars, our voting started before Oscar nominations were announced, and people of color were doing just fine before the Oscar nominations were announced. But it's really good to see that we had so many women represented, people of various ethnicities and nationalities represented. So I was very happy with this list, and now everyone is going to flood my Twitter mentions with their so. I'll take all of that.
We started on the 1st, and we continued up through last Friday, so 5 days after Oscar nominations were announced. But Daniel and I are following these results as they come in all along the way, and pretty much well before Oscar nominations, I'd say 4 out of 5 in any given category. It pretty much firmed up, that they were going to be in the group, and then occasionally you had that battle going on between 5, 6, 7 to get that last slot. So I don't know that we had much outrage over the Oscar nominations that caused results here. But here's what will happen next. As soon as this video ends, in a moment, the Prediction Center event will launch. You will be able to go in on any or all of the 22 categories. You do not rank anymore, though. You only get one option in each category, whatever you think is your favorite. You could go ahead and vote today, and you can change all the way up through February 1st. Your votes don't lock in until the Prediction Center event closes on February 1st. So if you want to go ahead and vote today, and then you still got some movies to see, that's perfectly fine. And then we will announce winners on Tuesday, February the 4th at the same time. We send out certificates to all of the winners, and we hear from them at parties and other places how much they appreciate you voting for them. And they know you're really film fans and not just, say internet trolls that are out to, stuff the ballot box. They know that you're film fans, and they really appreciate these nominations and these wins. So the full list is now on our homepage if you want to check out the full list, and you can vote. And thanks everybody, all of our fellow editors, for helping on this announcement, and thank you for watching.